Chapter 121, Leave your name well, let's go and have a look. Tang Zhan said with a smile. Scorpion hurried out of the car after hearing this, quickly came to the back door and opened the door for Tang Zhan. After Tang Zhan got off the car, 4 men in black suits walked down from 2 Bentleys respectively, one in front and another in the back. They were solemn and of proportional builds, however, their skills were extremely strong. It could be said that every one of them was only a little weaker than a master like Scorpion or Zhao Feng. More importantly, these people were a team. They were the special guards of Tang Zhan. Not their skills but their wonderful marksmanship was the most redoubtable. Tang Zhan peered at the facade of the restaurant after getting off, smiled with narrowed eyes and said, Xiao Feng has good taste after all. The facade of the restaurant looks great. In terms of appearance only, since Tang Zhan was courteous and accessible, always being willing to smile, no one would recognize him as the magnate of Southern District Underground Force. His appearance was relatively in line with a word. Those bald men liked cursing and smoking who striped to the waist with tattoos and ear holes, wore gold chains and held a small bag were all superficial persons. The real boss in society who was gentle and behaved acceptably, wearing a suit with a tie or a clean Chinese-style suit, holding a string of Buddha beads, usually smelling fragrance and tasting the tea, saying aphorisms seriously, acting as a successful man. Tang Zhan was this kind of people. At this time he took the lead into the restaurant with a smile. Whether Tang Zhan or Scorpion, did not even look at the sign beside the door. In the Southern District, besides the official departments, there was no place that scared him yet. He could also be described in 3 words, local emperor. The decoration does show ingenuity. Entering the restaurant, Tang Zhan looked around. After repressing a sigh of admiration, he stepped towards the sofa and stopped a few meters away. He smiled and said to Zhang Han, Excuse me, are you the boss here? Yep. Zhang Han cast a mild look at the 2 persons and nodded slightly. His indifference instantly made Scorpion frown, whose eyes stared at Zhang Han with hostility. Hello, boss. Tang Zhan kept smiling. He glanced at Meng Meng, who was playing with a remote control car in high spirits, saying, Your daughter is so cute and beautiful. But Zhang Han totally ignored him this time. Ignored Tang Zhan? Scorpion frowned again. Ha ha ha. Tang Zhan chuckled and asked, What kind of food do you offer? The restaurant isn't open now. If you want to see the menu, go out and look at the sign. Zhang Han replied coldly without even turning his head. The sign at the door was placed very close to the door. As long as you did not lower your head to play with your mobile phone, everyone probably could see it. Besides, there had not been a customer who accidentally came to the restaurant at the wrong time for several days. What Zhang Han answered at this point was quite honorific. But Zhang Han's attitude made Scorpion's face fall. He was about to rebuke angrily. You. His words were interrupted. Tang Zhan patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, looking at Zhang Han. Since the restaurant isn't open now, let's come here next time. After speaking, Tang Zhan turned to the door, while Scorpion stared at Zhang Han fiercely. He dared to refuse Lord Tang. He was courting death. Just then, Meng Meng was playing with the remote control car in high spirits, which drove to Scorpion standing not far from the right side of the sofa. Diddy, be careful. The car is coming. Diddy, it's going to hit. However, no sooner had the remote control car arrived at Scorpion's foot than he sneered and lifted his food, stepping on it. Kaka. The remote control car was crushed by his foot. Question mark. Meng Meng suddenly froze. She blinked her big eyes, took a look at Scorpion who was sneering and then at the remote control car that shattered under his foot. In an instant, tears filled her eyes. Oh. Meng Meng began to cry all of a sudden, whose voice was permeated with grievance and sadness. At this moment, Zhang Han's eyes were completely full of inexorability. It was the first time he had leaked this cold and murderous look since his rebirth. Zhang Han's body was just about to move when the little princess stumbled into Zhang Han's arms and wailed loudly. "Papa, the car broke down, oh, the car broke down, oh, it's okay, Meng Meng, don't cry, just wait a minute and Dad will buy you a new one, okay, stop crying, Meng Meng, you're so well behaved." Zhang Han quickly comforted Meng Meng, while Tang Zan stopped walking and looked back at this point. Still smiling, he said with blame, "Why did you ruin her car? Apologize." "Fine, Lord Tang." Scorpion nodded and said, simpering, "Oh, man, I'm sorry. Next time when you play with this kind of things, please be careful not to drive it to other people's foot. As for this car, haha, I'll send a bigger one later." While speaking, Scorpion's eyes were tinged with contempt. Send a car? Well, it would be great to send a truck and hit the restaurant directly. After finished speaking, Scorpion went out, following Tang Zan. At that time, Zhang Han was still comforting the little princess, but when the two men walked to the door to go out, Zhang Han suddenly said to them with a grimness that could be felt. Zhang Han said slowly, "Leave your name." Both Tang Zan and Scorpion stopped upon hearing his words. Tang Zan turned around, still smiling at Zhang Han. He had thought that Zhang Han was talking to him, but only found he was staring at Scorpion, so he shook his head and said nothing, while Scorpion said coldly with a stare, "Are you fucking asking me?" However, Zhang Han just stared at him and did not answer. "Ha, ha, ha." Scorpion laughed. His face suddenly fell, looking at Zhang Han coldly, and slowly said, "My name is Scorpion, Scorpion of Forever Harmony Association. If you want to find me, I'm waiting for you." After leaving his name, Scorpion followed Tang Zan out of the restaurant. Although they could see Zhang Han's faint expression clearly, it seemed that neither of them caught sight of the indifference in Zhang Han's eyes. That was the indifference to life. The indifference, though was calm, was indeed like the temporary tranquility before the volcanic eruption. Outside the restaurant, Tang Zan and Zhao Feng went straight back to the Rolls-Royce Phantom. They had no interest in seeing the sign of a small restaurant. "Lord Tang, this restaurant." Scorpion's sight was suffused with inhospitality. The first thought after getting in the car was to ask Tang Zan's idea. "This restaurant." Tang Zan looked at the plaque of the restaurant with a smile, showing a harmless expression and saying, "Let Zhao Feng handle it." "Okay." Scorpion uttered a snorting laugh, took out his mobile phone directly, dialed Zhao Feng and switched on speakerphone so that Tang Zan could hear. "Hello." Zhao Feng's deep voice was heard from the phone. "Madman, how's your hand? Was it crippled?" Scorpion said with a hint of disdain. "Cut out all this nonsense. Ha ha." Scorpion chuckled and said, "You're honest these days and haven't been to Meng Meng's restaurant, but today I went there, accompanying Lord Tang. What did you say?" Zhao Feng's tone obviously changed at the moment. His ragged breathing made Tang Zan's eyes flash. "I accompanied Lord Tang to the restaurant today, but the boss was very interesting and humiliated Lord Tang. I heard that this restaurant was under your, Zhao Feng's, protection. I think you should know how to deal with it." Scorpion sneered. Zhao Feng suddenly fell into silence. A few minutes later, Zhao Feng's slightly hoarse voice came out from the phone. "I know what to do." Finishing those words, Zhao Feng directly hung up. "Ho ho." Scorpion sneered, putting the car in gear and leaving. Tang Zan in the back seat, squinting slightly, looked out of the window at the street and nobody knew what he was thinking. On the other side, Zhao Feng was in his own residence, standing by the bed, looking out of the window with his face screwed up. What does he do? All the emotions were mixed. Zhao Feng felt the precious warmth in the restaurant these days. The restaurant, the boss, Meng Meng, Liang Mengkai, Zhao Du, Yu King, etc. all gave Zhao Feng different feelings. The ordinary daily life was very common, but let Zhao Feng yearn for. He was very tired and exhausted both physically and mentally when he worked for Tang Zan. which attributed to Tang Zan's cunning. At this time, however, Tang Zan wanted to fight against the restaurant, which made Zhao Feng be confused. What should I do? Zhao Feng gritted his teeth secretly. He did not want the restaurant to have any accidents, but disobeying Tang Zan's orders would get himself into trouble. This was too difficult to make a decision. Back to Zhang Han's restaurant. All right, Meng Meng, just stop crying. Zhang Han stroked Meng Meng's back fondly. Meng Meng was so sad because her car was trampled and even could not stop crying. Hearing Papa's comfort at this point, Meng Meng cried. Oh, Papa, my car was trampled, totally crushed. So we just go to buy a new one, okay? Zhang Han said softly. Oh, no, Meng Meng. Meng Meng only wants my own car. Meng Meng almost lost her voice and she coughed while speaking. Or let Papa fix this car. Sounds good? The car was trampled, totally crushed. After he coaxed her for more than half an hour, Meng Meng eased down. Zhang Han promised her to buy a new remote control car immediately, so he helped Meng Meng to change the clothes on the second floor. They went out to buy a bigger remote control car and went back to the restaurant again. Only when Meng Meng played with the new remote control car did her feel better. The little princess was fine, but Zhang Han not. He stepped to the window of the restaurant, took out his mobile phone, and looked out of the window. He was completely indifferent and his face was terrible. He made a phone call. Xian, return to the restaurant at noon. I have to go out. Chapter 122. Tell me where Scorpion is. What's up? Are you in a hurry? Xian was a little undecided and said. I'm going to hold an album release conference later. It will be ended until nearly 12 o'clock and I still have many things to do in the afternoon. There's even little time for lunch. Zhang Han gave a pause on hearing that and said, so just come back early or in the evening. Well, then I'll go to work and see you in the evening. Xian did not probe and hastily hung up the phone. After hanging up the phone, Xian adjusted her expression. Being about to walk into the conference site, she was a little nervous for a moment. It seemed that she had not experienced the press conference for a long time. After taking a deep breath, Xian and Zuf stepped into the scene. Under normal circumstances, the company would be only one artist to hold this kind of conference in a large meeting room, but today, for some reasons, she and Xuanhuan held the conferences at the same time in the conference room so that Zif kept saying, this is a covered scheme. Although the leadership gave an explanation that they had not enough time to make arrangements, Zif, as a veteran, actually did not believe it. She deemed that Maki just liked to find faults with Xian and wanted to revenge Xian for leaving without saying goodbye. However, it seemed that the contract had expired. What did Xian's reclusion have to do with her? Zif was angry and anxious. Even Xian was confused, but she had reached a point of no return. After entering the site, Xian and Zuf were led to their seats by the staff. Although there were two press conferences being held in one venue, the two parties were far apart from each other because of the large stage of the conference room. One was on the east and the other was on the west, having little influence on each other. When they were seated, they suddenly discovered that there were only a dozen media reporters on Xian's side, while there were 40 to 50 media reporters on Xuanhuan's side. A comparison between the two sides clearly showed who was more popular and who was sorehead. After Xian came in, Xuanhuan looked up with obvious exultation on her face. Elder sister Yan, who does she show for? Zif whispered beside Xian, did the company do this on purpose? It's really interesting. I didn't expect them to act so basely. We really shouldn't have signed the 3-year contract. Don't say anything more. Xian shook her head slightly and sighed inwardly at the same time. Of course, she knew the condition at present was questionable. She had a sneaking suspicion that all the arrangements were related to Li Cheng. Otherwise, even if her reclusion did make things difficult for Maki, she should not do such things since they had been friends for a couple of years. Li Cheng was likely to put every obstacle in her way. Xian was not a person who paid no attention to the outside world. She knew Li Cheng more or less. That person was definitely a playboy who was petty-minded. There were more than 18 people who had been dismissed on account of him. In fact, Xian had figured out the truth. At this time in Meki's office on the upstairs, Li Cheng was casually sitting on the sofa. I heard that Xuanhuan has released 3 top-quality songs. Will his concert on the 15th affect Xuanhuan's album? Li Cheng said with a smile. It'll be influenced more or less. People's attention is attracted by Xuanhuan. Now the 3 songs are played everywhere. It's estimated that after this hot period people will notice Xuanhuan's new songs. Meki nodded slightly. Li Cheng shook his head and sighed softly. He's really an unexpected obtruder bouncing in halfway, who released 3 new songs which were all masterpieces. No one has imagined. Who is Han Yang? Is he a senior songwriter? I can't guess who he is at all. Judging from the style and lyrics, he seems to be distinctive to those well-known songwriters. Moreover, his songs are well matched with Xuanhuan's style. If Han Yang hasn't been written on it, I'll maintain that the songs were written by Xuanhuan himself. Meki said solemnly. Forget it, it's beyond our expectation. Li Cheng shook his head and said, how's it going with Xian? Her affair? Meki said, giggling, the press conference downstairs is in full swing. Oh, that must be very interesting, ha, ha, ha. Li Cheng stood up, walked to the window, lit a cigarette, took a deep breath and said, some people are always in dreams, then I'll let her recognize reality. Have you arranged for all the things following? Everything has been arranged. She also stood up and walked to Li Cheng's side with a meaningful smile, sweeping her finger over Li Cheng's cheek and saying, since Xian signed the contract of 3 years, I've known she would never escape from you, pervert. Have you? Then I'll show you what a real pervert is. Li Cheng gave her a cheeky smile, threw away the cigarette he had just smoked and ran towards Meki. In the conference room downstairs, Xian's press conference was in full swing. When it came to the communion part, a man in his late 20s took the lead in asking questions. Excuse me, are you Xian? As soon as he finished asking, the room was silent. It was these words that would outrage a few susceptibilities. After a pause, Li Yan nodded her head and said, yes. Why did you retire? I heard that it was because of the emotional problems with your boyfriend, is that true? Another man asked. Exactly not. Xian answered concisely. So why didn't you hold a press conference to announce your retirement? In doing so, you haven't given any explanation to your fans. Did you feel guilty? A woman in her 20s asked a tricky question. Xian did not know how to explain this matter. Indeed, she did not give fans an explanation. Zif raised her eyebrows and said, I'm sorry, today's conference is about the album rather than gossips. Please ask some questions about the album, thank you. Miss Xian, please answer the question I just asked, okay? After all, if you don't explain it, fans won't go for it. The woman insistently asked. At the beginning, under people's gazes, Xian said slowly, it was my fault that I didn't give fans an explanation in the first place. It's not convenient to say more about the specific reason. I'll answer the following question related to the album. More than 10 reporters thought for a while at the moment. Then the female reporter asked again. May I ask Miss Xian, do you prepare the album carefully? Yes. Xian gave a positive answer. Although the quality of the songs was not satisfactory, they were finished with her and Zif's painstaking efforts. Then please. The reporters under the stage asked some questions about the album in succession, but the 3 or 4 of them always asked some tricky questions. It looked like they were trying to get Xian into trouble. Xian's responses to their question were perfect. After all, she had held such conferences many times. Back to Zhang Han's restaurant. Meng Meng's mood had been completely adjusted at noon. She was playing with the newly bought remote control car on the first floor, but she was still a little unhappy thinking of the ferocious uncle in the morning. An average person would like Meng Meng very much. Why was he so fierce? Over 12 o'clock, diners came as usual. Apart from egg fried rice and noodle soup, Zhang Han prepared Sichuan-style potato strips and simple cucumber with garlic sauce. Meng Meng liked to eat noodle soup with these two small cold dishes. It was indeed a pleasure to eat hot noodle soup with small cold dishes. At lunchtime, people who were familiar with Zhang Han, such as Liang Menkai, found that Zhang Han was in low spirits. Therefore they all kept silence. Just before the meal was ready, a Toyota Land Cruiser was parked in a parking space outside the restaurant. Zhao Feng got out of the car, walked into the restaurant and sat down in his usual position. Zhao Feng, what happened to your hand? Zhao Du asked, looking at Zhao Feng's hand. Hearing the tone of concern, Zhao Feng smiled and replied, I was scraped. Oh, Menkai. He's injured. Be quick to give his hand a blow. Zhao Du did know that Zhao Feng liked Liang Menkai, so he took the opportunity to tease her. Why, you go too far, little bitch. Liang Menkai glared at Zhao Du, then looked at Zhao Feng and said, maybe he got injured for he did something bad. Zhao Feng shook his head helplessly and sighed deeply in his heart. If something happened to the restaurant, probably he would never see Liang Menkai in the future. Besides, if they found the accident was caused by him, they would certainly bear grudges. Zhao Feng was depressed but helpless. He had to complete Tang Zan's task. The lunch was as usual. After all the people left, Zhao Feng quietly cleaned up the restaurant. Then he walked to the sofa, standing on the back, thinking for a while and saying, Boss, I want to ask you a favor. What? I want to borrow the restaurant for a few days. Zhao Feng said in a low voice. He only figured out one way after thinking. He borrowed the restaurant for a few days and smashed it, which could give Tang Zan an account. Then he decorated it, waiting for the boss to come back. Although this method was stupid and could not fool Tang Zan, Zhao Feng failed to find any other way. He was unwilling to hurt Zhang Han. In addition, he was no match for the boss. No way. However, Zhang Han refused directly. Zhao Feng froze and did not know what to say at that time. Is Lord Tang who brought you to trouble? Zhang Han turned to look at Zhao Feng and said calmly. Yep. Zhao Feng answered truthfully, I have no choice. So have you decided? I don't want to do so, but boss, you know I. All right. Zhang Han waved his hand directly and interrupted. Do you know Scorpion? Yes. Well, just go home. Zhang Han directly showed him the door. After a moment's silence, Zhao Feng eventually left the restaurant with his head down. At this moment, he did not know what to do. Time passed quickly. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Ziyan returned to the restaurant. After the meal, at nearly 9 o'clock, Zhang Han asked Ziyan to take Meng Meng back first. Ziyan did not ask. She left the restaurant with Meng Meng. The little princess still clamored for Zhang Han to come home earlier. Zhang Han replied with a smile, but when the little princess left, Zhang Han's expression faded. He walked out of the restaurant, sat into the panda car which was like a cheek and dialed Zhao Feng. After the phone was connected, Zhang Han just said a few words coldly. Tell me where Scorpion is. Chapter 123, An Unexpected Encounter with Liana. What's the location of Scorpion? Zhao Feng's face suddenly altered. He pondered for a moment and answered, wait a minute. Finishing those words, Zhao Feng just hung up, his brows furrowed. Boss is looking for Scorpion, what's he up to? Is anything going on between them? Could it be that Tang Zan and Scorpion went to the restaurant and pissed him off? Zhao Feng's heart lurched. Brother Feng, who is asking for Scorpion's whereabouts? The young man with short yellow hair asked curiously. Nowadays, there are still people who want to do business with Scorpion. With his crooked heart, anyone who does so will strike a bad patch. It's not like that. Zhao Feng shook his head and said, Tiger, check Scorpion's whereabouts right now. Okay. Tiger did not ask more questions but started to make phone calls in front of Zhao Feng. After a few calls, Tiger looked at Zhao Feng and said, "Got it, Scorpion is in room number 1, 7th floor, Chengxing nightclub, which is on An Street in the Southern District." "Yeah?" Zhao Feng nodded. Then, he picked up his mobile phone and directly dialed Zhang Han's number. "Boss, I got it. He is now in room number 1, 7th floor, Chengxing nightclub, the one that is on An Road in the Southern District. But why you want to find him?" At last, Zhao Feng could not help asking about the reason. However, before he could finish the sentence, the busy buzz already sounded from his phone. He hung up. Zhao Feng laughed without humor. "Boss?" Beside him, Tiger and the other guys all looked a little tense. They asked, "Brother Feng, who is that boss?" Even Brother Feng has to call him boss. He must be something. Facing that question, Zhao Feng merely shook his head but did not reply. After musing for a while, he mumbled, "I'm afraid that something will go wrong." After saying so, Zhao Feng headed out in a hurry. At the other end, Zhang Han searched the location of An Road and set off for it in his Geely Panda. Nightclubs were entertainment venues providing various night events. Although nightclubs in different areas would differ in nature and definition, their main themes were roughly all about dancing and other nightlife activities. Chengxing nightclub was the largest venue for nightlife activities on An Road. It was located in the area that Scorpion was in charge, so it was also the club where Scorpions made long stays. Chengxing nightclub occupied a whole building all by itself. It had a total of 7 floors, and its area was quite huge. On the first floor, there was a large bar, which was very popular among young people. Of course, one of the attractions of the bar was the opportunity to hook up with good-looking men or women. In the bar, as heavy metal music played up, everyone would follow the beat and reveal the wild side of themselves, adding that everyone was under the influence of alcohol. The chances to have a romantic encounter were quite high. At Chengxing nightclub, you could see bars, chartered rooms, high-end rooms, and everything you wanted. Plus, given that it was a place belonged to Scorpion, a member of the Forever Harmony Association, in terms of safety, it was a lot more secure than those that had no behind-the-scenes backers. It was not only a place full of Scorpion's intimidating fame but also his headquarters. Nearly 100 subordinates of his were stationed at the club, so almost no one dared to stir up trouble here. Half a year ago, 2 groups of men got drunk here and caused a big fight at the bar. In the end, the security staff gave the 8 troublemakers a good beat and broke their legs before dumping them on the porch. Later, no authorities ever looked into this incident, which was enough to demonstrate how formidably powerful the Forever Harmony Association was. Precisely on account of its great security, more and more customers were flocking into the club, making it a famous nightclub merely over the past 2 years. Zhang Han's car turned into An Road. When he was waiting for a red light that would last 1 minute, someone sitting in the front passenger seat of an Audi A6L next to his car rolled down its car window. "Brother Zhang Han, hello, Brother Zhang Han, you're here, too?" Liana stuck her head out a bit and yelled at Zhang Han. Zhang Han turned his head, glanced at her, gave a slight nod. "Where are you going?" Liana asked again. But Zhang Han already turned his head away, unwilling to make any reply or to lower his car window. Just as Liana was about to ask him again, a man with closely cropped hair who was driving scowled a little and simply rolled up the window. "Anna, it's obvious that gentleman doesn't want to speak, why bother talking to him?" The man with closely cropped hair said in a deep voice. The man with closely cropped hair was named Ma Cheng, a native resident who owned a small company and was pretty outstanding by any standard. He was a college classmate of Liana. After graduation, when he learned that Liana decided to stay in Hong Kong, he began to pursue her. However, since Ma Cheng was actually a bit petty and his disposition was not the kind that Liana favored, Liana did not fall for him. This time, if it had not been for the birthday party of her bestie in college, Liana would not use his car. There were totally 5 people in the car now, 2 men and 3 women, whose statuses were all inferior to Ma Cheng's. The moment he said so, a man with curly hair at the back immediately added, "Right, Anna, by doing so, you seem to be showing excessive passion to a poker face. Since he doesn't want to speak, you should just stop bugging him." "Exactly." Liana's bestie Wang said, "Anna, back then, you were our class belle. When had you ever hastened to strike up a conversation with a guy?" "Humphrey, what do you know?" Liana snorted. She leaned against the sofa, feeling rather down. "Why did brother Zhang Han ignore me?" When the red light changed to green, the line of traffic flowed forward. Ma Cheng, who was holding a grudge against the man in the panda car next to him, stamped hard on the accelerator. As his car overtook the panda car, he lowered his speed to block that car. But unexpectedly, the panda car showed no sign of slowing down, which gave Ma Cheng quite a turn and forced him to speed up hastily and keep going forward. "Fu K, is he mad?" Ma Cheng cursed in his undertone. Soon, his car arrived at the parking lot in front of Chenxing nightclub. When he parked his car and was about to get off, to his surprise, that panda car came in as well. "What?" Liana's eyes gleamed, and she came into a halt. When Zhang Han got off, Liana scuttled towards him. Standing in front of him, she spoke with a sweet smile. "Brother Zhang Han, you're here to have some fun, too?" "I'm here to handle some business." Zhang Han answered flatly. "Huh?" Liana was a little dazed. What business needs to be handled here? She actually thought since Zhang Han already saw her come with her friends, she would not lie about being here for fun, and she happened to not like Ma Cheng very much, so she was thinking about asking Zhang Han to join them. Thus, Liana sent out her invitation. "Brother Zhang Han, look at the lively crowd. Let's play together for a while, what do you say?" "Nah." Zhang Han shook his head slightly, walked straightly past Liana and headed to the gate of the nightclub. "Well, brother Zhang Han, why are you walking away?" Liana called blandly and hurried over to catch up with him. At this, Ma Cheng's face grew dark. He took the lead and strode up to her, then said, "Anna, he has his thing to deal with, you'd better not force him into doing something he dislikes. It's none of your business, is it?" Liana let out a soft groan, scurried over and caught up with Zhang Han. She abruptly tugged Zhang Han by the arm and said, "Brother Zhang Han, you won't have fun by yourself. Let's play with us." Zhang Han turned around and shot her a glimpse. Then, he announced in a sort of helpless tone, "I have business to attend to." "What kind of business could you possibly have at this place?" Liana pouted, standing on her toes. She stretched her neck towards Zhang Han and whispered into his ears, "Brother Zhang Han, a wet smack is chasing me. Please sit with me for a while." With others also present, he won't have the courage to ask me out. "Please do me a favor, brother Zhang Han." In fact, Liana just wanted Zhang Han to be her shield, for she knew Ma Cheng would not do so in the presence of Zhang Han. Of course, Liana did not have the face to speak out these words, but Zhang Han was well aware of what she meant. He had no intention to get involved in it, but considering the close relationship between Liana and Zhang Li, Zhang Han still had some scruples about turning down her request. Thus, after giving it a thought, Zhang Han finally nodded and said, "Okay. Hee, brother Zhang Han, you're the best." Liana said, chuckling. She had no idea that the intimate interaction between her and Zhang Han was all captured by Ma Cheng standing next to them, which nearly blew Ma Cheng's top. With a glum face, he led others through the gate and into the bar. They first went through a security check, which was designed to confirm they did not bring in any dangerous objects like the controlled items. Generally, there were always some customers getting drunk at the bar. When alcohol got the best of them, they might pick up a fight or something. In a drunken fit, they would throw anything they had at their opponents. After the security check, Ma Cheng asked for a table and ordered 5 imported wines and liquors worth more than 10,000 yuan. Then, a waiter ushered him into the nightlife area. Once he entered, a whirl of heavy metal music overwhelmed him. The rhythmical and dynamic music changed people's mood, making normally gentle and quiet guys reveal their wild side. On the dancing floor, lots of men and women were shaking their bodies as wildly as they liked. "Sir, here are the liquors you ordered. If you need anything, just tell me." After placing the liquors onto the table and said those words to Ma Cheng politely, the waiter grabbed a large bottle, put a lot of ice cubes in it, and then poured the alcohol and Sprite into the large bottle, gave it a few shakes, and poured a drink for each of them. After that, he turned around and walked to the front of the table. Zhang Han was sitting at the corner with his face straight and his eyes dim. He took a few glances at the bar. He had not visited a bar like this for many years. When he recalled that he used to frequent this kind of venues a lot, he could not help but sigh with emotions. "Brother Zhang Han, come on, have a drink with me." Liana handed a drink over and said beamingly, "Huh?" Zhang Han nodded and took the drink. He would take things as they come. Now that Zhang Han already promised Liana that he would sit by her for some time to accompany her instead of acting like he was ignoring her, after all, he had to do this out of consideration for somebody else. In light of her friendship with Zhang Li, he would more or less try to save her face. But now at the sight of Liana sitting closely beside Zhang Han, Ma Cheng was more vexed. He raised his glass and said, "Come on, today is Lulu's birthday, let's drink to that." Apart from Liana, the other two of the three women on the scene were a woman with yellow hair and a woman with a ponytail. The woman with yellow hair was Lulu, Liana's bestie, as well as the one who was celebrating her birthday today. When she heard Ma Cheng's appeal, Liana could only give up the idea of clinking glasses with Zhang Han alone for the moment. Zhang Han also raised his glass and took a sip very cooperatively. "Anna, why didn't your friend introduce himself when joining others' party? Isn't he too arrogant? Just now, I saw the panda car he rode here, and it costs less than 50,000 yuan, am I right? Hey, why is he behaving like this? Does he despise us?" After putting down his glass, Ma Cheng said cynically, "Yep." Zhang Han cast a mild look at him, and then, simply nodded. Chapter 124, Finally Launching the Strike, Part 100. Ma Cheng's face stiffened right off. He gawked at Zhang Han, a little baffled. Generally, regardless of the occasions, those who join others' party afterward will not say words like "I despise you." However, this guy just nodded and acknowledged it. "You look upon us?" Ma Cheng glowered at him and asked. His baffled feeling was replaced by a surge of anger. "So what?" Zhang Han said calmly. As he said so, the atmosphere directly went frozen. Even Lulu, the birthday girl, and her other friends looked quite disgruntled. "Well." Ma Cheng cast a look at his companions with widened eyes, and then said incredulously, "Really great, Anna, this friend of yours is really something. A man attending others' birthday party says he looks upon on others at the party, huh? What do you mean? Why are you so arrogant? What's your background? Answer me, let me see why you are so confident." As he said the last few words, Ma Cheng glared at Zhang Han fumingly. Judging by Ma Cheng's attitude, if Zhang Han did not give him an answer, he would lose his temper. "Don't fuss. Don't fuss." Actually, Zhang Han's words gave Liana quite a turn. It was also sort of beyond her expectations. It should be noted that every time when Zhang Han went for Zhang Li, he behaved as amiable as a big brother living next door, and that was one of the reasons that Liana found him appealing. But it never occurred to her that when dealing with other strangers, he would not budge at all. However, since today was Lulu's birthday, Liana did not want them to make a scene at the party. Thus, she opened her mouth to try to make peace. "Ma Cheng, save your words. Brother Zhang Han doesn't like talking to people who he doesn't know. In particular, the tone you just used was a bit vicious. Let's all talk less but drink more. Liana, do you think now we're in the mood for drinking?" The man with curly hair let out a snide laugh and continued, "Is it really because of Brother Ma's inconsiderate tone that he despises us? Well, dislike talking to strangers? Then, what is he doing here? Very interesting. Yeah?" The horsetail girl rolled her eyes at Zhang Han and said, "He is sitting at others' table for free, drinking others' drinks for free, but he is still saying such unpleasant words. How ridiculous. After hearing their complaints, Liana also became a bit anxious. Now, with the brother of her present bestie on one side and her bestie in college on the other, she was really at a loss. Also, she was now regretting dragging Zhang Han to sit with them. However, as he heard those words, Zhang Han still kept his plain face, not even casting a glance at the others. He ignored them all. Indeed, his behavior was rather reasonable. Well, how could an ant-eater ever care the ant's words? Enough. At last, Lulu, the birthday girl, opened her mouth to mediate. We are here for fun. We just need to enjoy ourselves now. Don't mention other things. Just do a favor for me, the birthday girl, all right? Well. Ma Cheng grinned, with his eyes fixed on Zhang Han. He said, fine, today, for the sake of Lulu, you bloke, I will simply pretend that I didn't hear your previous words, provided that you drink 3 glasses as self-punishment. Now, drink. How could 3 glasses be enough? Based on his attitude, he shall also bow and apologize to us at least. The man with curly hair sneered. For an ordinary man, taking down a whole bottle of imported liquor was a pretty tough experience. At this time, Zhang Han merely glimpsed at them indifferently and did not give any response. You brat, are you seeking for a good beat? Finally, Ma Cheng could not restrain himself any longer and hammered his fists on the table. He glowered at Zhang Han as if he was about to punch him. Seeing that the scene was going out of control, Lulu hurriedly got to her feet to pull Ma Cheng back. She said, fine, fine. Don't talk to this man who has no manners. Let's go to the dancing floor and have some fun. Lulu tugged and yanked, finally dragged Ma Cheng away from the table. Before he left, Ma Cheng threw a furious glare at Zhang Han. Liana, how did you end up with befriending such a bastard, driving a Dant Banda car that is only worth 12,000 yuan? Who does he think he is? The man with curly hair said in a wicked tone. Then, he turned his heels and headed towards the dancing floor. Anna, I also think your friend is so without manners. We'll wait for you on the dancing floor. The underlying meaning of those words was simply that she hoped Liana could send Zhang Han away by any excuses so as to not affect their party. After they took off, only Liana and Zhang Han were left at the table. Liana's expression looked quite mixed, while Zhang Han seemed to be rather composed. Brother Zhang Han. Liana said in a sort of chagrined voice, I'm sorry for adding so much trouble to you. She actually thought Zhang Han was not the one to blame, because the first thing Ma Cheng said was quite scornful. Anyone heard that would feel uncomfortable. Never mind. Zhang Han responded casually. It was also for the sake of Liana that he allowed the ones who just taunted him to leave the table scot-free. This time, he was here to flatten this place, so he would not mind teaching a lesson to a few dumb youngsters. By the way, I didn't know it would have turned out like this, brother Zhang Han, please don't take their words seriously. Liana said, attempting to make some promise. But Zhang Han shook his head slightly and replied, it's fine. I heard that back then you took good care of Lili, so you don't have to be so polite to me. When someone treated me an inch of respect, I would repay with a foot of respect. When someone robbed me of a kilo of rice, I would snatch thousands of kilos from him. This was the way Zhang Han had always operated. At the bar, Liana and Scorpion were exactly the typical cases of two kinds of guys Zhang Han had to deal with. I just did what I should. Liana smiled, and continued, heard that Lili and brother Zhang Han have opened a new restaurant. She told me the food there is very mouth-watering and wanted to take me the last time, but the past few days, I'd been too busy doing overtime work and didn't make it. Next time when I have the opportunity, I'll certainly go there and have a try. Yeah? Zhang Han nodded and said, go to see your friends. I'll go to attend my business after this drink. Well then. Liana nodded, holding up his glass. She said, let's drink. Zhang Han grabbed his glass, clinked it against Liana's, and took a gulp. Then, Liana stood up and walked away. After she took off, Zhang Han's eyes landed on the dancing floor ahead of him, took another sip of the liquor that in his eyes was of poor quality and felt the atmosphere both strange and familiar. On the other end, Ma Cheng was tugged to the dancing floor by force. He roared with a vexed face, "Stop, don't pull me, who is that brat? He is really swollen with arrogance, good for him. Let it go, brother Cheng." The man with curly hair hastened to comfort him. "Don't get angry because of that little scum. When we saw him driving that poor car, we knew he is an inferior man. He being without manners is also within expectations. Right, in my view, it's all because of Liana. We were just enjoying ourselves, but why did she ask another man to join us?" The horsetail girl said, sort of annoyed. "It was fine for him to join us, but he dared to get a haughty look as if we owed him money. He must have rocks in his head, loads of rocks. He is a lunatic. Just drop it, all of you." Liulu heaved a sigh, then said, "Let's stop being sulky. Look, isn't Anna coming to us?" They all looked over their shoulders to see Liana wedge her way out of the crowds towards them. When she came near but had not said anything, all of a sudden, a grey-haired man beside her who had had too much to drink abruptly fell back, weighing down upon Liana and forcing her to fall onto the ground. The man shook his head and rolled sideways. Then, when he saw there was quite a beauty being pressed under him, he giggled and said, "Oops, you're a beauty as well. Come on, beauty, I'll hold you in my arms and help you up." After saying that, he was going to cuddle Liana. At this scene, Ma Cheng's rage burst out. He howled furiously, "Hold her in your arms, Fukayu." When he finished those words, he kicked hard at the grey-haired man and let him land on the floor. "Shit!" The grey-haired man jerked his spinning head. As he blurted out cursing words, he got to his feet and grappled with Ma Cheng. Seeing this, Ma Cheng's companions did not just stand by and watch. Instead, they landed their fists and kicks on the grey-haired man as well. After a moment, two male fellows of the grey-haired man noticed what was happening. They rushed over and began to wrestle with the others. Their conflict caused those onlookers to take a few steps backward so as to give them a clearing field. At the scene, a waiter working at the bar spoke something to his walkie-talkie. In less than a minute, about 7 or 8 security staff all wearing black t-shirts stalked to the scene and subdued those who were in the middle of fighting each other. When the leader of the security staff saw that Liana and 2 other women were quite pretty, he beamingly commanded his subordinates to take them upstairs and let Brother Scorpion handle them. Therefore, all of them were escorted out of the bar through the side door. This little fuss did not have much impact on the nightclub. Even Zhang Han, who was at the other side of the room, did not detect what just occurred. After finishing his glass, Zhang Han stood up and strolled towards the outside. His eyes were extremely cold and aloof. When he walked out of the bar and arrived at the round lobby, he saw the lobby was still hustling and bustling. There were 2 elevators at the far end of the round lobby, with 2 guards in black stationing in front of each of them. Zhang Han went for the elevators with a cool face. Before he approached, one of the guards, a brush-cut man, asked Zhang Han, "Do you have our membership card?" However, Zhang Han did not give him a damn but continued to head forward. Without the membership card, you cannot use the elevator. If you're going to play on the 2nd or 3rd floor, just use the stairway on the left side. The brush-cut man said, scowling. Chengxing nightclub had a total of 7 floors. The area from the 1st to the 3rd floor was open to casual customers. From the 4th to the 6th floor, it was exclusively available for club members, which was the paradise for men. They provided various services, including gambling. Although the gambling activities were not large-scale, being able to run such a gambling business here was sufficient evidence of the power of the Forever Harmony Association. Facing the second demand, Zhang Han still did not reply. With his expression utterly calm, he continued to walk toward the elevators. "Hold it." The other bald guard strode to him with a ferocious look. He asked coldly, "Are you a fucking deaf? Didn't you hear that the elevators are not open to outsiders?" After saying so, the bald guy shot him a nasty glare. No matter whether the man in front of me is here to make trouble or not, I can tell he will do so simply with such an attitude of his. In that case, even if I have to maim him, I'll still get our big brother as my backup to settle it. Thus, the bald man grabbed an electric baton from behind with his right hand, pressed the button, and let the electric baton start buzzing. He headed for Zhang Han with a hideous grin. This scene drew the attention of passers-by. What was more, even several waiters at the reception counter as well as 2 rows of ushers in front of the gate started to cast curious looks on them. This kind of scene rarely occurred at Chenxing nightclub. Even when it did happen, it was incurred by those who were too drunk. However, it was the first time of this year to see a cold but sober man make a scene like this. Chapter 125, Choices. As they felt perplexed, they were all surmising, is this young man sick of being alive? Dare to stir up trouble at Brother Scorpion's territory? The consequences are unimaginable. But what happened the next moment made them drop their jaws. That bald man approached Zhang Han at a stride, lifted the electronic baton he was holding and snarled malevolently, "Fu K, I'll kill you." Just when those words faded, clatter, clatter, bang, bang, Zhang Han abruptly moved his hand and launched a seemingly soft punch each of the bald man's arms, but snapping sound of bones occurred, which was rather clear to hear. Even the bald man's arm was already positioned at a weird angle. Next, Zhang Han threw a kick on the bald man's belly, producing the first thud. Stooping, the bald man was thrown backward into the air. His body was shaped like a shrimp and crashed against the wall which was 6 meters away, causing the second thud, as blood spurted out from the bald man's mouth and nostrils. He passed out lying on the ground. Judging by the thud that sounded just now, people could tell that the strength of Zhang Han's strike was definitely strong. At this point, everyone in the lobby was rooted to the spot. Silence wrapped up the hall. You might hear a pin drop down on the floor. Zhang Han kept on walking forward, his face still tranquil, but as the other guards saw him coming, he was shivering with fear. You, what are you going to do? The man looked flustered. He tried to yell threateningly, "Do you know where this place is? This is Brother Scorpion's territory." But Zhang Han ignored his barks and went up to him, without giving him any time to react. His fist and kick landed on the guard again and sent him to meet the same fate the first guard did. Both of his elbows were comminuted fractured, and internal injury he got was also quite severe, which meant he would not be able to lift his arms anymore in the rest of his life. Was he too cruel? No, actually Zhang Han's strength was relatively weak. If he had the congenital phase above the base building phase, no one in Scorpion's gang would survive his attacks. You should never believe any expert who had reached tribulation phase was good-tempered. After beating the guards up, Zhang Han calmly stepped into an elevator and pressed the button of the 7th floor. When he left, people in the lobby exchanged shocked looks with one and another. All of their faces were written with conspicuous bafflement. Crap, someone is here for trouble. After coming to their senses, several waiters at the reception counter shrieked. They hastily yelled at the security personnel who carried a walkie-talkie standing sideways, "Quick, inform the upstairs." At those words, the security man hurriedly scooped up the walkie-talkie to notice guards upstairs. Other passers-by in the lobby all looked quite appalled. They cast a look at their companions and said incredulously, "He beat these guys like this with just 2 attacks? Crap, so relentless. He is absolutely a fierce guy. That man is so freaking powerful, attacking without a word. How ruthless." I think in recent days no incident like this has occurred. However, this is Brother Scorpion's territory. Well, how could he barge in so easily? Now that he has got the guts to go upstairs, probably he will soon be thrown out with broken limbs. People shook their heads and sighed. As they were engrossed in discussing Zhang Han's behavior, suddenly a man sprinted into the lobby. At the sight of the man, all the waiters were dazed, then nodded at him to show respect. "Brother Feng." They called in unison, but Zhao Feng did not answer them. He already caught the sight of the two men lying in front of the elevators, when he bustled over and glanced at them. His heart missed a beat. Gosh. Boss must be infuriated. Zhao Feng scuttled towards the other elevator and pounded the button impatiently. When the elevator opened, he rushed in and pressed the button of the 7th floor. At this moment, he could not be more concerned. Based on the status of the two guards, he could tell that the boss did not intend to show any mercy, which meant he was about to flare up. Plus, for an easygoing man like the boss, it would be really formidable once he flew off the handle. And the most important thing was that if the boss really slaughtered Scorpion today, he was afraid that there would be no more peaceful days in the future. Meanwhile, on the 7th floor of the nightclub, the 7th floor was an entertaining place for some senior members. It had 8 large deluxe private rooms in total, and each of them had everything that one expected to find. As a diversified entertaining venue, there were even several rooms similar to hotel rooms, which were explicitly prepared for those men and women who were seeking to get more entertained. Right now, Scorpion and some of his subordinates were in hall number 1, where sat over 20 people. Half of them were men, half were women. They were all sitting by a round table, eating, drinking, and having small talks. Next to Scorpion was a tall and slim beauty who looked a bit nervous. She was a campus belle that Scorpion's men specially selected from colleges. Now, this campus belle was wearing sexy clothes, leaning close to Scorpion a little tensely. "Brother Scorpion." One of his men knocked on the door and entered. He nodded at Scorpion and said respectfully, "Just now 2 groups of customers got into a fight at night entertaining venue on the 1st floor. Among them, a couple of girls are quite cute, so I come here to ask you, Brother Scorpion, for your advice." "Oh?" Scorpion narrowed his eyes, let out a faint laugh and said, "Bring them in." At those words, the man nodded and drew himself back from the room. Those around Scorpion burst into roars of laughter. "Now we have a show to watch. Ha ha. How long it has been since the last time someone dared to make trouble at this nightclub. Now it's getting very interesting." As they laughed, they also started to touch those pretty girls sitting beside them, which gave rise to a series of coquettish laughter. About a dozen of seconds later, after the man went away, he re-entered the room, followed by Ma Cheng's group and the grey-haired man with his 2 companions. A moment ago, they were either too drunk or too furious to control themselves, but when they were brought upstairs after they caused a fight, they instantly went sort of spiritless. Now, at the sight of the people in the room, they all felt their minds were in a whirl. Scorpion surveyed them with a few glances and eventually fixed his eyes upon Liana and the other 2 women. He squinted and said, "Stand separately, let me see who is from which group." Hearing those words, Ma Cheng and the others hurriedly stood in 2 groups. On one side are 3 men, on the other side are 2 men and 3 women. "Well, do you know the consequences of creating a disturbance at my club?" Scorpion asked casually. "Brother Scorpion, I'm so sorry, we know it's our faults, we will never dare to make any trouble here, I visit this club every day, the grey-haired man answered nervously. But before he could finish the sentence, Scorpion interrupted him coldly, "So you think you can get over this with just an apology?" The grey-haired man was astounded by this. He shook his head frenetically and said, No, that's not what I mean." Scorpion scorned and said, "Well then, what do you mean?" I. The grey-haired man became so anxious that cold sweat started to trickle down his forehead. He wanted to explain himself but was also in fear of saying the wrong words. "Bah, what a good-for-nothing." Scorpion sneered and stood up. He strode to the back of the sofa and drew out a steel rod. Then, with his eyes glinting a trace of cruelness, Scorpion stalked towards the grey-haired man. At this moment, the atmosphere at the scene gradually chilled. Scorpion's subordinates were watching all this with interest, while Ma Cheng and others who were brought here were utterly frightened. They could only feel the numbness of their scalps for now. That grey-haired man, in particular, went pale as those horrible things Scorpion had done ran through his mind. Flurried and troubled, He accidentally glimpsed at Ma Cheng out of the corner of his eye, so he hastened to point at him and said with a trembling voice, "Brother Scorpion, it's him who attacked first. I didn't want to fight at all, it's all him, I'm not the one to blame." At this, the two companions of the grey-haired man hastily echoed in agreement, "Right, right. They started the fight first, we're not at fault." "Huh, really?" Scorpion walked in front of them and stared at the terrified faces of the three. Then, he grinned before saying, "So, you guys did nothing wrong at all?" The face of the grey-haired man suddenly went wooden. Just as he attempted to give some reply, Scorpion did not allow him time to do so because the steel rod in his hand already whipped towards the arm of the grey-haired man. Crack! With a loud snap, the arm of the grey-haired man became bent. Ow! He collapsed onto the ground, holding the broken arm and screaming in pain. His companions gave a shudder. With their face pale, they wobblingly went down on their knees and cried bitterly, "Big brother, now we know we are at fault. Please give us a second chance. Please, I'm already giving you a second chance by only snapping one of your arms." Scorpion let out a vicious laugh. After saying so, the steel rod in his hand whipped up again. With two clear snaps, his two companions also met the same fate. How mighty! Those subordinates sitting on the sofa burst into enthusiastic applause and cheers. But the expressions of the girls sitting beside them were different. Some looked excited, some were full of sympathy, and some were utterly aloof and indifferent. Ma Cheng and his league were also terrified. Seeing Scorpion heading to them, they could not help but shrink back for fear that the next rod attack would land on their own arms. Even Liana began to want to kick herself hard for going to this birthday party. "Brother Scorpion, please calm down first. Don't hit me, just listen to my explanation." At the scene, Ma Cheng began to tremble with fear. "Explanation? Fine, give me an explanation, anyway, I am a reasonable man." Scorpion shook his head and gave a smile, and then, casually threw the steel rod aside and went over to Ma Cheng, looking rather sheepish. Seeing that he had ditched the steel rod, Ma Cheng heaved a small sigh of relief in his mind. He put on a flattering face and said, "Brother Scorpion, I admit it was my league that started this fight. I now apologize to you. Well, my name is Ma Cheng, a subordinate of Nan, who is also working for Brother Scorpion. In this way, we're actually in the same league." Clap. Before he finished his remarks, Scorpion landed a forceful slap on Ma Cheng's face, which sent him to rotate in a circle on the spot and felt dizzy and giddy. "Who is in the same fucking league with you, bringing up Nan with me? Don't you know that I've already broken all of his limbs and dumped him out of Hong Kong?" As he spoke, Scorpion trampled Ma Cheng's belly and caused him to fall onto the ground. Then, Scorpion's chilling eyes scanned the others and eventually rested on Liana and the other two females. He demanded, "Now, I'll give you two options. First one is you three can leave after doing a strip dance here. Second is you can leave after I break your both legs. You have 5 seconds to contemplate it." After hearing his remarks, the whole room seemed to get colder. Those subordinates of Scorpion looked quite relaxed as if they were watching a drama or something, while Liana, Lulu, and the ponytail girl were as pale as a sheet. 5, 4, 3. As Scorpion gazed at them, he began to count down the numbers. His eyes grew colder as the number decreased, which made the hairs of Liana and the other two prickled, as though they had just fallen down a cave of ice. 2. When Scorpion counted 2, he's already narrowed his eyes. Judging by his expression, when he called out 1, he would probably command his men to break their legs. Standing at the storm center, Liana and the other two were all ashen-faced. As Scorpion was about to count the last number, Lulu could not bear the mounting pressure anymore. She feebly slumped the ground and shrieked, "Dance! We dance!" Eek. Chapter 126, A Ruthless Hit. Ha ha ha. Scorpion laughed grimly, turned back to the sofa and sat down, slowly said, "Go ahead." After he finished speaking, Liu Lu and other two persons did not move, so Scorpion's men cursed. Dance, come on, I tell you, if you don't dance well, none of you can leave here today. If you don't dance well, we won't mind training you on the bed and taking a video to let the vast number of netizens watch. Hearing the words, they all felt desperate. What shall they do? What shall they do? Liana was almost ready to cry. She regretted coming to such a chaotic place today, but it was no use crying over spilled milk. If they did not dance, their virginity could not be guaranteed. Liana felt a little better when she remembered the videos she had seen, because all the strippers she had watched in the stripteases only took off their coats and showed sexy lingerie. In this way, she felt a little comforted and imagined she was wearing a bikini. However, she found that these people in front of her were too difficult to pack off. While thinking, she and the other two were pushed forward by Scorpion's men. Dance, take it off. Under the gazes of the multitude, they three trembled their bodies, reaching out their palms to the clothes. Simultaneously, Zhang Han took the elevator to the 7th floor. During this period, the receptionist on the 1st floor had already informed them what had happened, so the people in the nightclub knew that there was such a person who came here for trouble. The supervisor of the 7th floor called out nearly 20 people in several rooms, each of them holding a steel pipe. Similarly, a glint of acridity and excitement flitted across everyone's face. For them, the most thrilling moment was to punish such people who come to make trouble, because even if the troublemakers were beaten to death, the top authorities would cope with the aftermath of the accident. They, therefore, intended to conduct a full-on attack, so the supervisor in a suit ordered in a cold voice, "Don't hold back your strength, and just beat him to death. I'd like to see which idiot dares to make trouble here. Ho ho, I will never hold back later. Damn it, will lose face if I can't kill him." They spoke a few malicious words. Under their eyes, the elevator slowly rose to the 7th floor. Ding! When the elevator doors opened, they caught sight of the man they were about to fight with. A trace of doubt flashed through their eyes when they discovered Zhang Han was an effeminate man. Such a vulnerable person could go up to the 7th floor. They had thought that the person who came to make trouble must be tall and sturdy, but the current situation made them feel a little unacceptable. Such a weak man was likely to break his bone with only a blow, wasn't he? In the elevator, Zhang Han's face was almost devoid of expression and his eyes were full of indifference without any emotion. He turned a blind eye to the nearly 20 people outside and stepped forward. "Cub, are you making trouble here?" The supervisor of the 7th floor grabbed a steel stick in the hand from a low-level guy beside him, walked up with a ferocious smile, and asked before he took action. He thought that the man in front of him would give a satisfactory answer after understanding the situation and begged for forgiveness. However, the guy ignored him directly even without raising his eyes. Fuck, caught death? With a glimmer of malevolence in his eyes, the supervisor carried the steel pipe and rushed up. When he got close to Zhang Han, he raised the steel pipe, intending to hit Zhang Han on the head. Zhang Han moved before the supervisor hit him. Perhaps he deemed that his movements were too slow. As Zhang Han moved, people only felt dazzled. They were surprised to find that Zhang Han had already come over to the supervisor. He gave the latter an indifferent look and raised his foot to kick the supervisor's arms quickly. Clatter, clatter. Two arms were immediately kicked into strange shapes. Zhang Han, however, did not let him go. His foot took aim at the supervisor's knees. With two crisping sounds came out. The supervisor's knees were both broken. Then Zhang Han kicked him in the chest, sending him flying to 10 meters away. Narcosis. Quick as lightning. All this happened within 1 second. People just felt dazzled for a moment before the supervisor's body flew back. If without the 4 frightening and crisp fracture sounds, people would suspect if Zhang Han had acted. When the supervisor flew out upside down, the steel pipe in his hand rose up and rotated back and forth. Zhang Han reached out his palm and grasped it in his hand when it fell down. This scene astonished all the men. Their eyes widened in surprise and did not react at first. But after they returned to Earth, they, nearly 20 people, were angry inwardly and rushed up at the same time with ferocious expressions. Fuck. Kill him. Together up. All the people piled on, but they could not hit at the same time on account of the large number. As the first person rushed up, a steel stick mercilessly hit Zhang Han on the head. If the stick struck an ordinary person, he probably would bleed. What was more serious was that he might faint on the spot. However, confronted with this steel stick, Zhang Han looked calm. He raised his steel stick and hit the man with all his force. As the two crunches were heard, the man's arms were both broken. Then Zhang Han punched the man in the chest. Bang! The punch made him draw 6 or 7 steps back and scattered his companions. He felt unable to breathe and fell in a faint with a pale face. In the meantime, the other 4 people took up steel sticks and smashed him at different angles. Zhang Han did not avoid but used his steel stick to break their arms first and hit them with his foot, making them fly away in the shape of arches. Other people's faces changed greatly when they saw this. They had never expected that such a thin man would be a ruthless person. They looked at each other and knew that they were no match for him, so they stepped back. 4 or 5 of them on the back turned and ran to the staff's private room to call for help. They called out about 30 people again, which made loud noises. These people who came out later all held weapons of mass destruction like machetes, daggers and so on. Cut him to death. They were emboldened in the crowd. As a man cried out, they rushed up and lifted their arms to Zhang Han. However, the 5 men who rushed up at the beginning were also the fastest to fall down. Zhang Han was calm, waving his steel stick mercilessly. The clicking sounds were heard all the time. At this point, Zhang Han was like a super hurricane. Everywhere he went, all the things were destroyed. With every advance, several people fell to the ground with their arms broken. Comminuted fractures made them fail to bear the pain and go faint. Only after over 10 seconds, more than 20 people were found lying on the ground. By the time others were so scared of being beaten, they drew their bodies back quickly. As every step Zhang Han took forward, they had to take 3 or 4 steps back. In this way, Zhang Han walked slowly to hall number 1 inside while the rest of the dozen people with weapons quickly retreated. At this moment, Zhang Han was like deicide on the battlefield, facing the hordes of troops. He pushed forward and beat off them directly. This power made his enemies feel frightened. What a monster is he? How's that possible? Why is he so formidable? What shall we do? More than 10 people looked at each other and understood the meaning in each other's eyes. The next moment, they turned and fled, as if they were running a race. They knew that they were no match for him definitely, hence, they only could go to hall number 1 to tell Brother Scorpion. With Brother Scorpion, everything would be better. They admitted that the man in front of them was very formidable, but he was no match for Brother Scorpion. If Brother Scorpion replaced him, it was estimated that the number of people lying on the ground at least would break their limbs. At this point, in hall number 1, the 3 including Liana had all taken off their coats, leaving only bikini-like clothes. They stopped their hands at this moment and considered that all they had done could satisfy them. But Scorpion chuckled and said, "What are you 3 doing? Continue. Be quick." As soon as the words fell, their faces changed. Liana's expression was filled with anger, panic, and injustice. Finally, she could not bear the humiliation and shouted, "I don't." Then she wanted to pick up the clothes on the ground and put them on. But when her waist was about to bend, Scorpion gave her a black look and said coldly, "If you don't continue, I will order my men to trample you on the ground now." As soon as Scorpion finished speaking, 5 low-level guys on one side stood up and walked towards them. Liana's face was pale with fear. Eventually, she straightened up and was completely at a loss. "Be quick, as long as you dance, I'll let you leave safely." Scorpion smiled faintly. "Dance or not? Do you need our help?" Hey, if you need our help, it won't be so simple. Why don't you resist? In that case, we don't mind pushing you on the ground. A few words made them confused and scared. Dance. Scorpion's eyes darkened and said in an unkind tone. Liana and other two trembled with pale faces and their hands slowly stretched out to the back. During this period, Liana cried with tears rolling down. Just as the three slowly untied their underwear, the crowd was about to see their bodies. Suddenly, the door of the room was pushed open all of a sudden. Over a dozen people came in frantically. After entering, they quickly closed and locked the door, and then looked at the door with fear. This scene attracted the attention of Scorpion and others. Even Liana and other two persons stopped their movements and took this opportunity to fasten the ties again. "What are you doing?" Scorpion frowned and rebuked them. They were having fun, while a dozen people came running in with weapons. What did this mean? Something bad happens, brother, someone's coming to trouble. One of the guys shouted. What? Scorpion and others suddenly stood up. Someone. Scorpion just opened his mouth. Boom. With a huge crackling sound came from the door. They found the whole solid wood door burst into pieces. Two figures flew upside down from outside with wood chips and fell to the ground. They spat out blood continuously and looked at Scorpion. One of them trembled and said weakly, "Brother. There is." Outside. Chapter 127. Shots ring out. The man fainted before he could finish talking, as if he died on the battlefield. At this moment, the people, who played in the room right now, were really puzzled. They did not know what had happened. Some people wanted to ask what was going on, but when they saw the dozen or so people who retreated and stared at the entrance where sawdust flew as if they had seen something terrible, they looked over in the direction of these men's gazes. The hall was in silence at this point and people could only hear their own breathing. Even Ma Cheng, the curly-haired man, and Liana were dumbfounded, but they knew that someone was making trouble, which would benefit them. Even Liana and other two persons had already put on their own clothes and hidden aside. Finally, more than 10 seconds later, sawdust drifted down gradually and a seemingly emaciated figure slowly came in. Brother Zhang Han. Liana's eyes gradually widened and tears overflowed again. She was really touched at this moment, for she had not expected that Zhang Han would come here to save her, which made Liana realize that Zhang Han was her Prince Charming. However, this was entirely wishful thinking. After Zhang Han walked into the room, he did not look at anyone else but stared at Scorpion calmly. "You?" Scorpion arched an eyebrow and curved his lips with a malevolent smile. He had not expected Zhang Han dared to make trouble here before he found fault with him. "Damn it, fellow, do you court death here?" Scorpion said coldly. Zhang Han totally ignored what Scorpion said. Liana, who was standing nearby, quickly walked to Zhang Han and said in a moving quiver, "Brother Zhang Han, go out first." Zhang Han took a look at Liana at this time and opened his mouth for the first time since he got to the 7th floor. Liana looked at Zhang Han affectionately with tears, nodded and walked out with the other two female companions. Ma Cheng and the curly-haired man on the other side rushed up to him. They were too embarrassed to see Zhang Han and just ran out with their heads down. Hardly had they went out when they saw more than 30 people lying in the corridor. Their faces suddenly changed. "Oh, my God." Liu covered her mouth and could not believe what she had seen. "Let's get out of here," Liana said in her trembling voice and hurried to the elevator with her companions. Ding! As soon as they arrived at the elevator, Zhao Feng reached the 7th floor by elevator. Zhao Feng came out while Liana and her companions came in. They looked at each other and did not say anything. When Zhao Feng saw the people lying on the ground, his face changed. He quickly crouched down to check the people and was relieved after he found that they were not dead. Although his boss was formidable, he was afraid of making things worse. If these people were beaten to death, no matter how strong his boss was, he would be punished by the authority. But these people's elbows were smashed and even their arms could not be used anymore. Zhao Feng felt worried. Even so, his boss was at deep enmity with the Forever Harmony Association. How did Scorpion provoke boss to make him attack without mercy? Zhao Feng quickly got up and headed for the hall number 1. Suddenly his heart beat faster. Oh, no, did Scorpion bother Meng Meng? He thought of Meng Meng, the little princess, who was Zhang Han's bottom line. Considering his indulgence to her, the people who bothered Meng Meng would be killed by him. If his boss killed Scorpion, then things would go beyond control. Zhao Feng ran inside anxiously. At this time, there were more than 20 people lying on the ground in the hall number 1. In addition to those women, there remained Scorpion and 5 men who had not rushed to Zhang Han. They were completely shocked by the incredible scene. This man spent only 10 seconds breaking more than 20 people's arms and stunned them. What kind of evil could he be? Who are you? A drop of cold sweat trickled down Scorpion's forehead. This was the first time that he had felt so stressful. He had no pressure last time when he fought against one of the giants of the new Loyalty Brotherhood. It was totally different from what he acted now. Zhang Han neglected Scorpion's question and stepped towards Scorpion calmly, holding a steel rod shimmering with a more chilling light than usual. The instant Zhang Han moved, Scorpion's body tensed up. He had not taken any action, but his 5 men had stretched their hands to their lower backs. One of them took out his gun from his waist and pointed at Zhang Han. Whoosh! As he raised his arms, Zhang Han moved, throwing the steel rod towards him and penetrating the man's arm like a sharp arrow. The gun in his hand fell, but Zhang Han rushed to his front and grabbed the gun with his left hand after it had just dropped a few centimeters. Meanwhile, he split the man's other arm with his right hand. Crack! Then, when Zhang Han lifted his leg, touching the man's knees, 2 clear and crisp sounds were heard. He knelt on the ground with his legs bending an angle of 90 degrees in the opposite direction and went faint. At this time, the other 4 men also took out their pistols. Just as they were about to make some moves, Zhang Han had already launched an offensive. Click, 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 click. These people immediately followed the man's example. Some of the women who hid in the corner were unable to bear the horror in their hearts and screamed out. Scorpion quivered. To be honest, he did not realize how Zhang Han moved. He was so fast. Who the hell are you? Cold sweat had wet Scorpion's hair and he contained his fear, asking again. In Scorpion's view, how could a man as powerful as him be an owner of a restaurant? He must have strong background. If he could know his origins, coupled with Tang Zan's force, perhaps this feud could be settled. He even did not want to revenge but to escape misfortune. However, Zhang Han still ignored him and turned to walk towards Scorpion step by step. The footsteps seemed to ring in Scorpion's heart, which made his heart beat faster involuntarily. He swallowed and said with difficulty, "Sir, there's no need to do this." When he found the indifference in Zhang Han's eyes, he could not continue. He realized that if Zhang Han wanted to make moves, no one else would be able to stop him. Seeing Zhang Han getting closer and closer, Scorpion's eyes were suffused with acridity. He was not a person who was allowing others to trample upon at will, so he pulled out a folded dagger from the lower back and unfolded it. From its blade, it could be seen that the dagger was extremely sharp. Go to hell! Scorpion thundered and rushed over quickly. Simultaneously, the dagger in his hand stabbed towards Zhang Han's head with all his strength. However, Zhang Han, facing his dagger, did not evade. He looked at Scorpion coldly without any emotion in his eyes, as if he was looking at a corpse. No. All of a sudden, outside the door came a scream and Zhao Feng arrived, following Zhang Han. He took the elevator a minute later than Zhang Han. However, in this 1 minute, Zhang Han had beat people all the way from the elevator to the hall number 1. At this point, Zhao Feng was shocked seeing the boss not hiding from the dagger. Even the dozen women shivered in the corner screaming at the sight of this scene, as if they were going to see a horrible scene that Zhang Han's head was pierced the next moment. Under the gazes of the crowd, the dagger was getting closer and closer to Zhang Han. When it was only 10 centimeters away from Zhang Han's head, Zhang Han had not moved but stared at Scorpion all the time. Closer, closer. The dagger was only 3 centimeters away from Zhang Han. People seemed to feel its sharpness. Even Scorpion's face had lit up with pleasure. However, the next scene did widen people's eyes. When the dagger was only 1 centimeter away from Zhang Han, his right hand moved and held the dagger in place with only his index and middle fingers. Scorpion's eyes rounded. He looked at Zhang Han with disbelief and pulled the dagger vigorously but failed to abstract it from his fingers, which were like a large pinchers. You! Scorpion was in a panic. He was about to say something, but he had no chance. As Zhang Han's finger pulled back, the dagger was immediately pulled out of Scorpion's hand. The next moment, Zhang Han shook his hand and the dagger, like a sharp arrow, pierced completely through Scorpion's right palm. Scorpion quivered. When he was about to cry out, Zhang Han's right fist immediately hit him in the arms. Within 2 seconds, Zhang Han gave out 18 punches. Click, click, click. A series of blows made Scorpion's arms as soft as noodles. He could not bear the terrible pain and fell to the ground. However, before he fell, Zhang Han's right foot moved and he kicked Scorpion's legs violently. 2 seconds later, Scorpion fell to the ground. Oh, my God! Zhao Feng's facial muscles trembled uncontrollably. He had never expected that boss would be so fierce when he launched a vicious attack. The next moment, Zhang Han raised his pistol and pointed at Scorpion's head. No, 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 boss, take it easy, you can't kill him. Zhao Feng said, trembling with fear. But at this moment, Zhang Han ignored him. He looked at Scorpion with indifference. In his eyes, Scorpion was just a non-entity that could be killed easily. Scorpion's face was pale and his body was numb. He looked at Zhang Han in horror and asked in a trembling voice, why? You tell me. Zhang Han gave a bland response. These words also reminded Scorpion of the fact that he had crushed his daughter's remote control car. This was indeed the only reason, and he had never met Zhang Han at any other time. But how could he destroy Chengxing Bar for such a trifle? Scorpion felt in pain, but seeing Zhang Han loading the gun, he was startled and begged for mercy in a weak voice, retaining his hard sanity. Don't kill me, I am sorry, I'll buy you 100 remote control cars. Oh no, 1,000, 10,000, please let me go. While speaking, his eyes were filled with fear. Zhang Han stood there emotionless and his chilly look made Scorpion feel completely disheartened. Eventually, Zhang Han opened his mouth and said in an unconcerned tone. Compensate? Ha ha ha, I'm sorry, even your life is not as valuable as a single drop of tear of my daughter. Bang, 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 bang. After he finished speaking, shots rang out. Chapter 128. Who did this? Ah! Someone is shooting people. A dozen women in the room closed their eyes in horror and exclaimed. Even Zhao Feng trembled with fear. He looked over and was relieved after he found Zhang Han had only shot Scorpion in the ears instead of his head. But then he gave a wry smile again. Even if he did not kill anyone, Tang Zan would not sit back for such a troubling thing since Zhang Han had beat Scorpion up and flattened Chengxing nightclub. This boss. Zhao Feng shook his head and said, Tang Zan Mei, don't say such things. Zhang Han looked at Scorpion, who had fainted, for the last time, and threw the gun at Scorpion's chest. He turned to the door, lowered his head slightly to Zhao Feng and said coldly, if he dares to take revenge, then let him come. After finishing speaking, Zhang Han went straight to the outside. Zhao Feng gave a wry smile, hesitated for a moment and dialed Tang Zan's number. Lord Tang, Scorpion was discarded, in Chengxing nightclub. After the call, watching Zhang Han walking into the elevator, Zhao Feng sighed softly. It was no use crying over spilled milk. Zhao Feng also had no idea what to do. Now since he was here, he had to inform Tang Zan and could not get too intimate with Zhang Han at the same time, as his every move was recorded in the monitor of the corridor and their intimacy would be troublesome if it was found by Tang Zan. What should he do? Zhao Feng lit a cigarette and sucked it deeply. His eyes were dark caverns and he was in such a mess. Does he really need to find a way to break into Tang Zan's secret chamber? Breaking into the secret chamber was a narrow escape. Zhao Feng did not want to try until the 11th hour. However, if Tang Zhan was about to fight against his boss, Zhao Feng might not turn a blind eye to him, but even if he helped boss, they were no match for Tang Zhan. In Zhao Feng's view, the current situation seemed to be a deadlock, which was a big headache. On the other side, when Zhang Han reached the first floor and headed to the outside, the people at the reception desk in the hall, as well as more than a dozen ushers and several security guards, were dumbfounded instantly. What happened? How was that possible? How could he come down? Brother Scorpion didn't beat him? My God, this is the first time I have seen someone leave safely after making troubles. The crowd whispered to each other. They even could not believe their eyes and had never expected that the brothers on the 7th floor were all defeated. Zhang Han went out of the nightclub and walked straight to his car. At this point, standing by the Audi A6L, Liana and her companions still had the jitters. However, apart from fear, her worry about Zhang Han and deep appreciation were showed in her face. Anna, is he your boyfriend? Having standing downstairs for a while, Ma Cheng finally asked. None of your business. Liana said sourly. Ma Cheng sighed and said, I didn't mean anything. I was worried about him. I haven't expected him to be so kind that he rescued us regardless of his own life. I just want to know if he is your boyfriend. If so, I'll give up. Liana was going to say no after hearing his word, for brother Zhang Han had a daughter already, but when she heard Ma Cheng's last words, Liana nodded directly and said, yes. All right. Ma Cheng took a deep breath, glanced at his watch and said, so we will wait 3 minutes. If he doesn't come out, we should call the police. Here he comes, here he comes. Liulu suddenly saw Zhang Han coming this way. They rushed up to meet him, and among them, Liana was the fastest, for she was the person who felt so moved. She raised her arms while running as if she wanted to throw herself at Zhang Han. But when she approached, Zhang Han leaned to one side without a trace and did not let Liana hold himself. Brother Zhang Han. Liana sipped her mouth and said, thank you, brother Zhang Han, if not you, we. Suddenly Liana's eyes reddened while speaking. If Zhang Han had not come in time, the consequences would be too ghastly to contemplate. Meanwhile, she had not expected that the gang would be so fierce. Yes, elder brother, thank you very much today. The horsetail girl said sincerely. I'm sorry, I was bad-tempered today and have said something wrong. I'm so sorry, I hope you can forgive me. Ma Cheng bowed his head in shame. Elder brother, please don't take it to heart. If you are available now, we want to reciprocate your kindness. The girly-haired man issued his invitation. But Zhang Han only looked at them flatly and said, I helped you incidentally and you don't need to thank me. After finishing speaking, Zhang Han walked ahead directly side on. These people, including Ma Cheng, froze. They thought Zhang Han was angry with them and he was just to save Liana, but incidentally saved them. As a matter of fact, they had not expected that Liana was also saved incidentally, and the only reason for him to come here was Meng Meng's tear. Zhang Han walked towards his car. When he was about to get on, Liana rushed over and said, Brother Zhang Han, can I take your car? Okay. Thinking that he was going to the Union Garden in Easton where Liana could hitch a ride, Zhang Han agreed, nodding his head. Liana's face lit up with pleasure and got into Zhang Han's car. Looking at her expression, people could know that even if Ma Cheng drove a luxury car worth tens of millions of yuan, she would definitely choose this panda car, which was only worth tens of thousands of yuan. Ma Cheng and the others remained standing in the same spot and stared at the panda car moving far away after Liana got on the car. How formidable he is! There are more than 20 people lying in the corridor and we don't know whether they are dead or alive. He's really powerful. The girly-haired man exclaimed. Exactly. I looked down upon him when I saw him driving a panda car. I acted like a snob. He must be a man who has experienced a lot. Ma Cheng said unwittingly. Anna did find a true son of heaven. Lulu's eyes were imbued with amazement. Today was definitely unforgettable for these people. In the panda car. As soon as Liana got in the car, she looked self-conscious, glancing at Zhang Han secretly several times. She could not help but said, "Brother Zhang Han, how did you know we were caught?" "I don't know." Zhang Han replied casually. So. Liana was slightly surprised and faltered. She thought Zhang Han fought for her in her heart, but she believed that Zhang Han was not the kind of persons who told lies at the same time. "I was looking for Scorpion today." Zhang Han gave her a look and said, "Oh." Liana lowered her head and compressed her mouth into a thin line, feeling at a loss. "But if I know you've been caught, considering your relationship with Xiali, I'll not stand by," Zhang Han added. His words made Liana laugh. She said with a smile, "Thank you, Brother Zhang Han. Half an hour after Zhang Han left Chengxing nightclub, a line of more than a dozen black cars drove over at a high speed. In the center was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, accompanied by two Bentleys in front and behind. In addition to the three cars, the others were all Mercedes-Benz. The motorcade attracted many people's attention on both sides of the street while they were driving on the road, but people's eyes were more fixed on the entrance of Chengxing nightclub, where parked 5 ambulances and doctors were busy inside and outside. From a distance, a lot of people could see many casualties being carried out in a hurry. "Oh, my God, whose motorcade is this?" "Hush, keep your voice down, don't you see the Rolls-Royce in the middle? That's Forever Harmony Association's Lord Tang, Tangzan's car." Generally speaking, Lord Tang will not take so many people. What happened? A knowledgeable man in the crowd said. "No one is blind, looking at the ambulances over there and no less than 20 people being carried out. There may be something terrible happened in the nightclub." Lord Tang of Forever Harmony Association. Oh, he's indeed a great man, but who could make such a big deal in his territory? Terrible. While people were talking to each other, the motorcade stopped in front of Chengxing nightclub. Soon, Tangzan got out of the Rolls-Royce Phantom in the center. In the meantime, from the two Bentleys in front and behind, 5 men with extraordinary momentum came down. They were Tangzan's most important men, one of whom was a mastermind and the other 4 were top thugs. Tangzan's guards got off the other Mercedes-Benz cars, who all dressed in loose black suits, with indifferent and grim expressions. Tangzan led the way to the nightclub. At this moment, he was grim-faced with his eyebrows slightly wrinkled, completely losing his smile. After they entered the nightclub, all the ushers and passers-by became nervous because the aura was too frightening. But Tangzan and his guards ignored and went straight to the 7th floor. "Lord Tang," Zhao Feng said, nodding his head slightly. "Where's Scorpion?" Tangzan said in a serious tone. Everyone who was familiar with him realized he was angry now. "Inside." Zhao Feng responded and took the lead to hall number 1. Nearly 20 people marched to hall number 1. When they saw the scene inside, their faces changed slightly. In addition to Scorpion, there were still 5 people waiting for the rescue personnel to carry them out. "How serious his injury is?" Looking at Scorpion's twisted noodle-shaped body, Tangzan said in a low voice. 48 people were injured, 36 of whom suffered comminuted fractures of their elbows and arms, 11 of whom suffered comminuted fractures of their elbows and knees. As for Scorpion, all of his limbs and bones were comminuted, his left hand was pierced and his ears were smashed by bullets. "I'm afraid that he has to live in bed in the future." Zhao Feng replied. Everyone, including the guards of Tangzan, turned pale with horror after hearing what he said. Who did this? A trace of acridity flitted across Tangzan's face. Chapter 129, Billows will be lifted. He's the owner of Meng Meng Causal Restaurant. Zhao Feng slightly lowered his head and answered truthfully. "Oh?" Tangzan grinned and said, "Show me the camera footage." Although he was smiling, the coldness in his eyes could be seen by all present. Zhao Feng gestured the manager of the nightclub over. One of the young men took a laptop and showed the scene just had happened, with some fear on his face. At this time, all the people present were looking at the camera footage. The monitor recorded the whole process from Zhang Han's entrance into the nightclub, then into the night bar and into the elevator after he came out to his moves against the two elevator guards. The monitor even did not clearly capture the way of Zhang Han's first move on account of its incredible speed, leaving only traces of afterimage. What? Impossible. How can he be so fast? The other top thugs of Tangzan all changed their faces. They could not believe that people could move so fast. Not only them but also the guards of Tangzan had changed their faces. They reckoned that if the speed of his body was as quick as the real-time speed of his arm, they had to waste many prejudgment bullets before touched him even if they were holding guns. The coldness in Tangzan's eyes suddenly turned into dismay. The boss's sharp moves were also beyond his expectation. However, the pictures of the first floor were just a beginning. The monitor was debugged by the staff and started to show the scene of the 7th floor, when people saw Zhang Han send more than 10 people into the air in 10 seconds, fight against lots of people with himself and burst into the hall number 1 in less than 1 minute, their eyes rounded with astonishment. Until Zhang Han entered the hall number 1, the footage was less than 1 minute. A lot of people ran out of the hall, and Zhao Feng arrived. Then Zhang Han came out calmly and looked at the monitor when he walked to the elevator. His glance was so frigid that as if it could shoot through the screen, making people feel cold. At this moment, people, including Tangzan, in the hall were silent. Although Tangzan was still looking at the screen, his blurred look revealed that he was thinking about something. Xialong, are you confident to defeat him? Tangzan turned and said, looking at the two men. Xialong and Armin were the two most powerful men under Tangzan's charge, who had learned Kung Fu and had a good knowledge of something deeper, but their faces obviously changed at this point. After hearing Tangzan's question, Armin's facial muscles quivered. His lips moved for a while and finally spat out a few words. It's totally out of the question. He's right. Xialong took a deep breath and gave a more direct and straightforward statement. Even if all the people here gathered to fight against him, we're no match for him, let alone Amin and me. Tangzan closed his eyes after hearing his words, and took a deep breath before he said, I know. A moment later, Tangzan opened his eyes and said, did the man say anything when he came up? Tangzan also did not know why the boss came here to make trouble. Just because of a remote control car, he denied this statement, suspecting that it was Scorpion who had provoked him. After hearing this, the man who was operating the computer honestly replied, there were more than a dozen girls in the hall, and that man did not beat them. I heard that after the man knocked down Scorpion, he said a few words, which meant, Scorpion's life was no match for a single tear of her daughter. Tangzan suddenly froze hearing his words and his eyes were full of consternation. Actually he did that for such a trivial reason. He ruined a nightclub just because of a remote control car. Nearly 50 people were beaten and got injured. He's indeed an interesting person. Tangzan compressed his lips and said in a low voice, send Scorpion to the private hospital. Contact the best orthopedic hospital in North America and make every effort to treat him until he gets better. Transfer 50 million to his card and let him settle in North America in the future. Fine. Several men rushed forward and carried Scorpion and others out. Tangzan glanced around at the people at present and finally fixed his eyes on Zhao Feng. He shook his head with a chuckle and turned to the window, lit a cigarette and took a deep breath. Xiao Feng, I heard you have a good relationship with the boss, so why you didn't stop him when you came? He hid dangers in his words and Zhao Feng knew no matter how he answered, it was useless. Since Scorpion had been disabled and the nightclub was destroyed, he realized that Tangzan must be in a bad mood. He thought for a while and replied, as a diner, I just like the food there. Moreover, I'm sure I was no match for him when I saw his moves. No match for him. Tangzan sighed slightly and said, you're indeed no match for him, so how can I deal with him? You? What do you say? You was a thin man behind Tangzan who had not opened his mouth. wearing a pair of 400-degree glasses. He was a mastermind in charge of the drug business. At this time, Mu pondered after hearing this and finally looked at Zhao Feng, saying, "Since we're going to fight against him and Zhao Feng is familiar with that man, I think he is the best person to deal with him." "Oh, isn't he?" Tang Zan slowly turned around, stared at Zhao Feng and said slowly, "Can you defeat him, Zhao Feng?" After hearing what he said, Zhao Feng lowered his head slightly and got lost in thought. He knew that if he refused this time, he would be cut out by Tang Zan. However, it was not the right time to offend him openly. Zhao Feng forced himself to say, "Lord Tang, I know, I'll try my best." "Great." Tang Zan stepped forward, patted Zhao Feng on the shoulder and said with a smile, "I believe you won't let me down. I'll give you 2 weeks. Having finished speaking, Tang Zan took the lead to the outside. At the same time, the news that Chengxing nightclub was ruined and Scorpion was disabled spread like wildfire. Some people of Forever Harmony Association who were in connection with other forces also spread the shocking news in the first place. The New Moon Bay where Zhang Han lived belonged to the South Island of Hong Kong. It was relatively the smallest area in Hong Kong but was fully equipped. From the perspective of underground forces alone, the South Island was divided into 4 parts. One was Forever Harmony Association headed by Tang Zan in the southern district. The second was New Loyalty Brotherhood led by Xuanhuan in the north district. The third was Union Garden Zone where Xian lived and the fourth was a force headed by Dong Danping in the West Ring Road Zone. The primary strength of the 4 forces was almost the same, but relatively speaking, Tang Zan led the most potent force. Because he had a wide range of sphere of influence and contacts, even he was on good terms with a general in the Golden Triangle. Most importantly, his means had always been extreme. At this time, one of Tang Zan's right-hand man was beaten down. The news was like a hurricane that swept across the entire South Island. New Loyalty Brotherhood was the most hostile to Tang Zan. Xuanhuan and a dozen of his men were in the study. "Is the news true?" One of the bold men stood up and looked at the man who had just run in to notify them and asked, "It's possible to beat Scorpion in some retired places. But in Chengxing nightclub? As Scorpion's headquarters, how could it be destroyed? It's absolutely true." The man quickly replied, "Even quite a few passers-by saw dozens of people being carried out from Chengxing and I have already got the inside video of Chengxing nightclub." "Then what are you waiting for? Play it quickly." The bald man said immediately. So this man took a projector and projected the video on the wall. All the people in the room looked over at this moment and saw Zhang Han came out of the bar in the video. There was a red circle in the video suggested that Zhang Han was the main character. He walked to the elevator, took action, came to the 7th floor, defeated dozens of people with his enormous power, then walked into the hall number 1 and left calmly. More than a minute later, more than 10 minutes later, the injured men were carried away and then Scorpion was carried out by Tang Zan's men. With the screen, everyone could see that Scorpion's body was as soft as noodles, and of course, they realized Scorpion was seriously hurt. After watching this video, a dozen people present changed their faces completely. It turned out to be true. The bald man suddenly stood, aghast. "Oh, my God, this man is too formidable. It's incredible for him to beat Scorpion and his men alone." People were shocked. Even Xuanhuan, who was sitting at the back of his desk, changed his face after watching the video. He stood up and paced back and forth. After a while, he stopped, looked at some of his best men and said, "Xia Dong, what do you think of that man?" After hearing this, Xia Dong, who was sitting on the lower side, nodded his head and said slowly with a dignified look, "He is the most powerful one I have ever seen. Even if I join hands with that we're no match for him. Both his speed and strength are terrible. I can use 4 words to describe him. He is so horrible." Xuanhuan's face changed. He thought for a moment and burst out laughing. "Ha, ha, great. The more powerful he is, the more interested I am. Do you know the specific identity of that person? I don't know yet, but we got his license plate number and I have already sent someone to look it up. The man nodded and answered, well. Xia Shanhao's eyes brightened and he said with a smile, try your best and meet all his demands. Be sure to let him join in new loyalty brotherhood. But elder brother, I'm afraid that we are unable to control such a tough person, Xia Dong said, slightly frowning. Generally speaking, the strong were supercilious persons. How could they serve others? Even if we attracted him by benefit, he might not be completely obedient. It's okay. Xia Shanhao, however, revealed a meaningful smile and said, how could Tang Zan sit idly by while one of his right-hand men was beaten to death and the Chenxing nightclub was flattened? Judging from his temperature, perhaps his lungs are going to explode. Before he moves, we should try our best to let the superior join in our association, since an enemy of our enemy is our friend. Okay. Not only Xia Shanhao, but Yihan in Eastern and Dong Tanping in Western did the same thing in their study and conference room. A master only came out by accident. Similarly, a master from a certain special force would be popular everywhere, not to mention Zhang Han, who was a super master. At that time, the underground forces in the South Island of Hong Kong lifted billows again due to Zhang Han's moves. Chapter 130. Uninvited guests put aside the underground forces' reactions. After Zhang Han drove Liana to her community, he directly returned to Union Garden. He could unimpeded access to the apartment with the elevator card. He knocked at the door and saw Wang Wan opening the door with a warm smile. Mr. Zhang is back. While speaking, she brought Zhang Han a pair of men's slippers, which were no longer disposable items. Wang Wan bought them while going to the market. She had also regarded Zhang Han as Xian's husband in her mind. Every time Zhang Han came, Xian, Meng and he emerged in harmony and joy, and they really looked like a family. No sooner had Meng seen Zhang Han coming to the second floor than she ran towards him, stretched out her small arms and said childishly, Papa, Papa, why are you back so late? It's at 11 o'clock. Zhang Han picked Meng up and said with a chuckle, Dad had something to do. Zhang Han was just like an even-tempered father with a smile and did not have murderous look. He held Meng in his arms, looking at her delicate cheeks and happy smile. Zhang Han's heart gradually melted. Meng is a treasure, and I'll spend my whole life guarding her. At this moment, Zhang Han considered that the title of Han Yang Immortal, treasures and accomplishments could be abandoned. Only Meng, he would guard her all the time. This is the feeling of being a father. Zhang Han sighed softly, remembering his parents. He was anxious and helpless, for he did not know where they were and how they were doing. Papa, let's find Mama. I've drawn a picture about Papa, Mama, and Meng. The little princess pointed in the direction of Xian in Zhang Han's arms. As Zhang Han walked over and sat down, Meng leaned out of Zhang Han's arms, stretching out her arms to bring back the drawing paper, and said with expectation, Papa, look at it. Does it look good? Well, that's really good. Meng draws better. Zhang Han said with a smile. Ho, ho, ho. Meng locked Zhang Han's neck cheerfully and kissed on his cheek with her soft lips. It was at 11 o'clock. Having played with Meng for more than half an hour, Xian and Zhang Han came to the bedroom to hum the little princess to sleep. Will your album be released tomorrow? After Meng fell asleep, Zhang Han asked in a low voice. Yes, it'll be on sale tomorrow. Xian nodded her head softly. Will you have time after the sale? Zhang Han said casually. Impossible. Xian gave Zhang Han an angry stare with her beautiful eyes and said, the release is only the beginning, there are still lots of things to do and I have to be on the shows. Furthermore, I probably have to travel. In short, I'll have no leisure. Since this work is so busy, just give it up. You can record your songs at home and send them to the internet. Zhang Han could not help saying. In his opinion, being a singer or a movie star did not mean that she had to be so busy. Virtually, Xian could promote her popularity if he wrote some famous songs whose singers had not emerged yet at will. Oh, gentlemen, it's not as simple as you think. After hearing this, Xian twisted her lips into a smile. Her pressure for the release which would begin tomorrow was also relieved owing to Zhang Han's concern. She snorted softly and said, all in all, you don't understand. Sometimes stars who are at the prime of their careers have experienced a lot and taken painstaking efforts. Everyone's success is not readily available. Oh, then just let Meng live the tomorrow. It's inconvenient for you to spend a lot of time on your commute. Zhang Han said. What about me? Xian looked at Zhang Han unblinkingly and her heart beat somehow faster after saying this. She did not know how he would answer. Will he take the opportunity to confess his love to me? If he does, how should I reply? Xian was a little confused, while Zhang Han directly replied. Come back by yourself. Xian was astonished, looking at Zhang Han dully. You can stay in the restaurant, for there is enough room. Zhang Han added. Xian gawked at Zhang Han. After a while, she widened her eyes and said angrily, no way, I like making round trips. Get out, I want to rest. Zhang Han gave Xian a puzzling look and turned to leave the bedroom. Xian sat on the bed with a snort and pouted unhappily, saying, he is an idiot, what an asshole, he doesn't know how to care about others. He's indeed a male chauvinist. Lying on the bed and looking at Meng who slept soundly, Li Yan smiled and gradually fell asleep. Nothing happened during the night. The next day, the 15th, was a very important day for some people. In the morning, Zhang Han returned to the restaurant. Due to the time, he only made egg fried rice and noodle soup for breakfast. After eating noodle soup for several days, people's enthusiasm towards it gradually dissipated and the situation that noodle soup sold out earlier than egg fried rice also changed. They were sold at the same speed. Xian ate a small bowl of egg fried rice and a bowl of noodle soup, while Zuf finished a large bowl of egg fried rice and noodle soup. Then she took Xian to work, burping. At 9:30, a group of guests came to the restaurant. 5 supercars approached the restaurant, among which the most valuable was an $8 million brilliant red Lamborghini Aventador and the cheapest was a BMW A8 costing nearly $1 million. 8 people got out of the cars. A blue-haired and thin-faced man from Lamborghini led the way to the entrance of the restaurant. Brother Liang, this is the restaurant my friends talked about. They said that the egg fried rice in this restaurant was so delicious that as if they had been to heaven. One of them said to the blue-haired man. Okay. Qiu Liang nodded and said calmly, so let's enjoy the feeling of going to heaven. All the people were the members of the second-generation circle of the South Island. Although they were not the richest young men, they were also famous. The property in their families did support them to enjoy life. Furthermore, they were on good terms with some official people and persons from underground forces. Qiu Liang held the highest position among these young people. His family ran a financial company and his father had business contacts with many bigwigs in Hong Kong. However, while occupying status, they also possessed arrogance at the same time. 5 of them were men and the others were women. Men were plain-looking while the women were graceful, who were apparently girlfriends of some of the men. When they walked to the restaurant, a tall beauty with yellow curly hair looked at the sign and then she said in surprise. Oh, look at this. Egg fried rice and noodle soup cost 300 yuan each. The first 10 membership cards cost 10 million each and the following cards cost 100 million each. Oh, my god, so expensive. Even a glass of milk costs 100 yuan. Ha ha. A brush-cut man smiled and said, don't make a fuss. Without the high price, we wouldn't have come to this restaurant. Let's go in and have a look. If the food is not delicious, I can close the restaurant for its high price. Qiu Liang hissed and led the way in. Entering the restaurant, they found no one in the lobby on the first floor. Is there anyone? Boss, what are they doing? They shouted a few times, but no one responded to them except the faint music in the stereo. How can they run a restaurant like this? The brush-cut man lifted his eyebrows and said in a disgruntled tone. Who knows, not a single person is in the restaurant. The woman with curly hair said, curling her lips, I'm afraid we came to a joint. Hello. The brush-cut man clapped the table and cried, are all dead? Is there anyone here? The owner of this restaurant is really interesting. I don't even see a single person. What a fart. Another long-haired man sneered. In general, the restaurant's service personnel were uninterrupted, especially in such a fast-paced city like Hong Kong, where service was paramount. It was the first time they were waiting as guests. How could the arrogant guys stand waiting without getting things clear? No matter how delicious the food was, they were already very dissatisfied with the restaurant. Damn it, how can the owner run this restaurant with such bad service? Let us send someone to check it out. Then Brush-Cut Man sneered. His name was Song Ying, a second-generation rich, whose uncle was a cadre at the official departmental level and was in charge of the food and beverage supervision. Therefore, he had a lot of pull in the food and beverage field. Apart from Huo Liang, he held the highest position. I think it should be checked. There's a problem with the price. That's right, the restaurant has no waiters and sells expensive membership cards. This is a big problem. Exactly, this is the first time I have seen such a restaurant. If the food can't satisfy me, we don't need to treat them friendly. Huo Liang said, frowning slightly. He hated waiting for others most. Every time, no matter who he was waiting for, the longer he waited, the more violent he would be. If he was in a bad mood, he would not let the people he waited for feel good. Don't ask why, since he held the highest position in his circle, he was indeed bad-tempered, although there were a lot of people who were more powerful than him in Hong Kong. He usually played with the people whose statuses were inferior to his. An arbitrary feeling did make him comfortable. What are you yelling for? All of a sudden, a light voice came from the corner of the stairs. Under these people's gazes, Zhang Han walked to the first floor while wiping his palm with a towel, looking at the crowd blandly. He frowned slightly and said, the sign is right in front of the door, won't you look at it when you come in? Zhang Han's words made them astonished first and then lit up their anger. They had waited for a long time. However, the man did not apologize to them but frowned and spoke in such an insipid and repugnant tone. Why he was so cocky. Rules are dead but people are alive. As consumers, we're there. Huo Liang said with a sneer. Before he finished speaking, Zhang Han looked at him coldly and interrupted, you're nothing to me.